My guest today is Alberto Salazar. Al, welcome to Detroit Lakes.
It's great to be here, Dick.
Well, we are so excited. You're here for the 8th running of the Dick Beardsley Half Marathon and 5K, and I understand you'll be running the half marathon.
Yes, this will be the furthest I've run in over a year, so my goal is to complete the distance.
Well, I'm sure that'll happen easily, and I know our community is so excited about having you here. And over the last few weeks, when the buzz has really got going that you're coming, and people are thinking that you and I are going to have this this big duel in the sun like we did 21 years ago, but I got a feeling we'll both be well behind the lead pack, I would imagine.
Well, we probably will be, and I'll be well behind you. So I'm gonna. I think my days of beating you are in the past. You beat me the last 3 out of 3, so I'm conceding victory right now.
Well, let's talk about how you got involved in running, because I got involved in running when I was in high school, and I know you were a really good high school runner out in Massachusetts. And what got you involved in the sport of long distance running?
The number one reason I started running was because of an older brother, Ricardo. He's 4 years older than me, and like a lot of the little brothers, I emulated him. And he got me interested at a young age in running. When he was a freshman in high school, I would have been in 5th grade or so. And he bought a stopwatch, which at that time everybody thought that was really cool. Stopwatches weren't that common. And we would measure out a 50-yard dash in front of our house, and then we would run 50-yard dashes. And sometimes we'd run around the block, which was a half a mile. And so I started playing at running when I was young, when I was 10, 11, 12 years old.
And having fun at it.
And exactly, it was fun. No one was forcing us to do it. There was no coach. It was just the neighborhood kids going and having foot races. And so at an early age, I learned to enjoy running, and it was something that stuck through me all my life. And once I got into high school, that was my goal, was to be a distance runner, and I just kept going from there.
So when did you know, what age do you think you were when you thought, you know what, I could be pretty good at this if I really work hard at it?
It was actually pretty early. When I was in 8th grade, and my brother would have been, Ricardo would have been, I guess, in maybe 10th grade at that time or so. He came home from a cross-country meet, and he told me that there was the younger brother of another runner in the league, and this younger brother was in 8th grade, had gone and run in a JV race, and had been allowed, even though he was in 8th grade, he allowed to run in the high school JV race, and he had gotten 3rd or 4th place, and he did it in 2 meets. And being competitive, all of a sudden I started thinking, you know what, this guy's getting a leg up on me. He's getting experience. I got to go do this. So my high school coach-to-be allowed me to run in the next 2 high school JV meets, and I won them both in 8th grade. Wow. And at that point, I knew, and I guess my coaches knew that I had some talent, and I didn't train until I got into high school. But that year I would have been 13 or so at that time. I knew that I was a good distance runner.
I know a lot of high school kids will be watching this show. What kind of times, Al, did you run in, like, say, cross country and track? Did you run 5,000 meters in cross country or 3 miles? Do you remember?
High schoschool cross country in Massachusetts was, and I think it still may be, 3 miles.
Okay.
And yeah, but I think I ran somewhere. By the time I ran my senior year, I was down to, I believe I ran like 14:07 or so.
Wow.
3 miles.
And now what about, obviously you probably ran track then in high school when you got into high school. Yep. What kind of times and what events did you run in high school?
Well, back then it wasn't metric. Events were in yards, and so we had the distance events were the half mile, the 880 yards, the mile, and then of course the 2 mile.
Yep.
And for those distances, as a freshman, I believe I ran 9:44 for 2 miles, and then I was down to 9:28 as a sophomore. 9 minutes as a junior, and then finally 8:53 as a senior. So I had, I was someone that had early success, and that fueled the desire to train even harder and to improve more.
Now with times like that, being a state champion as you were, that had to open some doors for the next level going on to college. Obviously you had probably some colleges after you.
Yeah, I had pretty good grades in high school, and so with my running, I pretty much I could have gone wherever I wanted to go, but my dream was to go to the University of Oregon.
And known so much for their great distance running program and everything out there.
Right, that's what it was known for. The University of Oregon to distance running at that time was what UCLA was to basketball.
Right.
If you were a young high school distance runner, that was your dream, was to run there. And so when I got a scholarship offer there, even though I still went and visited a few other schools, I knew that was where I wanted to go.
And who was your coach there?
My coach was Bill Dellinger, who was a 3-time Olympic team member, three-time Olympian, and won a bronze medal in the 1964 Olympics in Tokyo.
Yeah. Now, did you see big improvements right away when you got into college working with him, or was it kind of like, here I am, a freshman in college and I'm going up against some of these, sophomore, junior, and seniors, or were you one of their top runners right off the bat?
I was very successful for a freshman in terms of running times as a freshman in college that were very good, but at that time there was a huge influx of great African runners into our college system. And so when I was a freshman, I was having to run against a world record holder in 4 events. That was Henry Rono from Kenya, who was running at Washington State University. So I was running great times for American kids, a freshman, but I was getting beat by a lap at 10,000 meters. So, it was humbling from that extent. I mean, it was good to know that I was progressing and running the times that I needed to run to hopefully get to a world-class level later. But I certainly didn't get a big head because, it's hard to get a big head when you're getting lapped or beaten by half a lap by someone. And but it was a great experience for me.
And you were one of these, a person that eventually ran the marathon, but was more of a 5,000, 10,000 meter runner. Now, correct me, but at one time you did hold the 5,000 and the 10,000 American record, was it?
Correct.
Okay.
Right. Yep.
And then what got you to decide, you know what, I'm going to give this thing called the marathon a try, 26.2 miles?
When I was 16 years old, I was a junior in high school, I started to train with a club called the Greater Boston Track Club, and it was coached by a very eccentric and great guy called Bill Squires, who you are, of course, familiar with because he coached you in your best years. And Bill Squires started coaching me when I was a junior in high school, and my high school coach was a great guy for letting me go on. I mean, he knew that was a good opportunity for me, so I still ran all my high school meets, but I was allowed to train with these post-collegiate runners. And one of the guys at that time that Bill Squires was coaching was a young runner called Bill Rogers. And I had just been with the club 3 months, and I really didn't know who was who, and I didn't really know who Bill Rogers was. And then I was running workouts with this guy, or running part of the workouts with him, and I go out to watch the Boston Marathon one day, and the darn guy wins the race. And it's like, I'm thinking, wow, this is the guy that I'm training with. And that club was primarily devoted to the marathon. That's what the runners in that club wanted to, do the most. And so at an early age, I was sort of indoctrinated to the marathon, and I was around marathoners. And I had guys like Bill Rogers that were telling me and reinforcing in my mind. They were saying, my nickname was the Rookie. They called me the Rookie because I was this young little kid that didn't know anything. And they used to tell me, Rookie, you're going to be a great marathoner, but wait. Develop yourself on the track first and your speed, but the marathon's going to be your event. And I believed them. And so I just kept thinking, I'm going to wait. Coach Squires told me, wait till you're out of college. That's when you can run one. So I just waited, kept developing my speed. But that was always the plan. From when I was 16 years old, I can remember telling people I'm going to have the world record in the marathon.
Yeah, well,
I was lucky.
Yeah, and let's talk about that, because in 1980, you decided to run your first marathon at one of the biggest marathons in the world, the New York City Marathon. And what caught everybody's headlines was you weren't just coming there to run it, you were going to run under 2:10. That was your goal, I believe, that day, to win it and run under 2 hours and 10 minutes, and you did exactly that. You ran the fastest first-time marathon ever in the world at that time, and I think you ran like 2:09:40 or 41, something like that.
Right. Yeah. Well, what happened there, and again, it's the media and in interviews often they will splice statements that you've made together. And I had made comments before the race that I thought I could run under 2:10.
Yeah.
And the reason I thought that was because, once again, I had this background of, I was 22 or so at this point.
Right.
But I had been running with guys when I was 16 that were 2:10 marathoners. And to be frank, I knew that I was better than them.
Sure.
I mean, because I was running with them and doing their workouts when I was 16, 17 years old and beating them when I was 18.
Right.
Had everything up through 10,000 meters. And so I knew what it took to be a marathoner because that's what I'd been brought up in, a marathon club. So it wasn't like I was someone that, even though I hadn't technically run a marathon, I knew what the training entailed. I knew the sort of training that others had done that, frankly, didn't have my same God-given ability. And so I knew that I could run a 2:10.
Yeah.
The winning part, that was a little distorted because you never know. I mean, you can say, well, I think I'm ready to run 2:10, but hey, there may be another guy you have no control over that's going to run 2:09. But anyways, it made for a good story, and And fortunately for me, it happened. Otherwise I would have,
Yeah,
there would
because
have been a
Bill
lot of people
Rogers
jumping.
was going for his 5th straight New York City win that year.
Right.
And I was in the race that year. I got 9th, I think. I was, you don't remember this, I'm sure, but I was leading coming off the Queensboro Bridge onto First Avenue.
I remember, yeah.
And you, boy, when you went by me, you were flying.
Yeah.
I'm telling you. And then your second one was the following year at New York, correct?
Correct.
Where you won that again. And what did you run that year?
2:08:13.
That's right. That's where you set the world record. How can I forget? And basically, pretty much ran all by yourself, the last few miles?
Probably about the last 10 miles.
Yeah.
There was the runner that ended up getting second wasn't the runner that stayed up the longest. There was a runner from Mexico, Jose Gomez, that was up there through about 17 miles. And then I was pretty much on my own from there. And then I think a Finnish runner ended up getting second.
Yeah. And Al, you ran 2:08:13 that day. When you came across that finish line, what was it like for you? I mean, obviously you were ecstatic. You just set a world record, won the 2nd consecutive New York City Marathon for yourself. But were you just really beat up? I mean, how did you feel after that?
Very emotional. I mean, definitely coming across the line. I mean, physically, I'm sure I felt it at the time. But I mean, knowing, even with, let's say, 3 miles to go, that I was on world record pace. And, although I was hurting, you sort of know whether you're going to be able to handle it or not. And knowing that I was handling it, and that, unless some sort of disaster struck, that I was going to break the record. I mean, it was very exciting and gratifying. And then finally, I guess, maybe with a quarter of a mile to go and seeing my time there and, making the minute addition and knowing, all right, I got the record. That was a great moment. I mean, it was just very satisfying. I guess it was a feeling of finishing and, at that instant, really sort of being able to say, you know what, I did what I told myself I was going to do 6 years ago. And that doesn't always happen in life, and it definitely, and that's probably the best that it ever worked for me.
Sure.
I mean, I had other good races, but I mean, in terms of my training, everything going perfect.
Yeah.
Everything went perfect for that race.
Right.
No injuries, great workouts, great training, a race where I felt like I was in control, and that was a once-in-a-lifetime race in terms of it going perfect and feeling relatively comfortable.
Yeah. So your 2nd marathon you ever run, you set the world record. Your 3rd marathon then, was that Boston 1982, or did you have another one in there?
No, that's right. The 3rd one would have been Boston.
Boston 1982, and that's the race that you and I ran together. 10 days before that event, you ran against Henry Ronan. I was in the 10,000 meter on the track. Was Henry still the world record holder in the 10,000 at that point?
Yes, he still had the world records at 10,000, 5,000.
And what was the world record then? Do you remember?
It was 27:21.1 or something.
And that day, though, you guys, I mean, on a kind of a cold, rainy day in Eugene, Oregon, you guys ran this incredible 10,000 meter race where Henry just, basically, it was like a photo finish at the end, wasn't it?
Yeah, he won by about a second, but he beat me by a belly.
Yeah, by a belly.
And I say that because this is how great a runner Henry Rono was. That even though I was a second behind him there, he was by far better than me at 10,000. He was probably 10 or 15 pounds overweight.
Isn't that amazing?
We have pictures of it, and you can see his gut hanging over his shorts.
Wow.
And the guy was that good.
And is that where you set the American record that day?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I had the second fastest. The American record at that point was 27:29 by Craig Virgin. I ran 27:30. Later that summer, I ran 27:25 and another 27:29 or something.
Yeah. Well, then you and I, we got to the Boston Marathon. You running your first Boston Marathon, myself running my first Boston Marathon. And for me, I'll never forget when I'm standing at in the front row of that in Hopkinton there, and I'm looking down and I see you off to my left or right, I can't remember, and Bill Rogers, and I'm thinking, I'm almost a little intimidated. I'm thinking, wow, I'm on the line with the two of the greatest runners the world's ever seen in marathoning. And I remember when that gun went off, I swear it was like you were shot out of a cannon. And just the other day, I looked at my old logbook, and I have on there that we went through the first mile in 4:33.
Wow.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, that first half is downhill, but still.
Yeah, I wasn't aware it was that fast.
What, Al, I know you grew up in the Boston area. There had to have been an incredible amount of pressure on you. Here you are, the world record holder. You're coming back to your hometown area to run in, probably the greatest marathon there is in the world. Was there a lot of pressure on you coming into that race?
I'm sure there was. I mean, to be honest, it's hard to remember right now how much. Most of the pressure that I ever felt in running was self-imposed. It really wasn't what other people were saying and that I had to win or whatever, because of what other people were going to say or how the media was going to treat it. It was myself. I mean, I put a tremendous amount of pressure on myself, and probably more than I should have, probably more than was healthy. And I used to take it pretty hard when I didn't run well. I didn't throw tantrums or yell and scream or anything like that. But inside, I would be really mad at myself and hard on myself for weeks or even months. And so yeah, I always, after my marathons, when they were finished, I just felt such a tremendous amount of relief, whether it went good or bad. I mean, obviously it felt a lot better when they went good, but I always just felt like it was a huge weight off my shoulders. I remember the thing I enjoyed most about marathons was after the race, soaking in a tub.
Me too.
Whatever, just in there, and it was relaxing, it was quiet, there was no people around.
I agree.
Sit there, and it was just, all those worries were gone.
Yeah.
The pressure.
Alberto Salazar in only his third marathon. But watch Beardsley. Beardsley is making a move. It has come down to this. Beardsley and Salazar. The motorcycle's got to get out of the way. Here comes Beardsley. He's got to make a move on Salazar. Salazar looks behind him. It is neck and neck. One of the closest finish ever. Here comes Beardsley. Beardsley on the left. There's Salazar. Beardsley, can he have enough? Salazar kicking. Pushing off the final challenge by Dick Beardsley to win the 1982 Boston Marathon.
Well, that day, that race is one that I will never forget, obviously, and I can't thank you enough for being there at that year, that kind of shape you're in, and the way we went at it, all the way to the very end, and it's just something I'll never forget. I mean, I knew you were a very, very tough runner, and I was throwing everything I could at you, and it was like I just couldn't budge from you, and it came down to the end there, and we both did everything we could to try to beat each other. But that's what I've always said about what is so neat about running, and what is so neat about yourself. I mean, we were very fierce competitors back in those days, yet when we got done with the race that day, we both embraced each other and said what a great race we each ran. And I know when you got the laurel wreath and you brought me up there on the podium with you and raised my arm up also, and I tell you what, that meant a lot to me, and it's a race that I will never ever forget.
Well, it's the same for me. I've had other races, but when I look back, I look back at Boston as probably being, the epitome of what running should be all about.
Sure.
And it's two guys going all out against each other. And when it's over, it's over. You're friends again.
That's right.
And just giving it 100%. And and that's why it is true that there hasn't been a Boston Marathon before or since where you had the two favorites that fought it out from Hopkinton all the way to the finish, and just dueled it out, and nobody ever budged an inch, and gave it everything they had, and actually finished up there in first and second. A lot of times there's favorites, but they're spread out. And so it was a tremendous race. It was probably the greatest American distance race.
Yeah, I agree, and a lot of people would agree too.
Right.
Now, Al, I know you moved on. Then you made, you're on the '84 Olympic team. You moved on. I know you had some injuries and some illnesses, but you've been running all along. But now you're doing something I know that you really, really enjoy. You still get out and you run every day, and although you don't run competitively anymore, neither do I, like we did back then. But now you're working with a couple of different groups, a group of Nike athletes that you're trying to really get back to. Hopefully they can run times like we did 20-some years ago. And before we get on with your other part too, talk just briefly, if you can, about this program and some of these athletes that you're working with and what you're trying to do with Nike.
Well, at Nike, we've started a program 2 years ago. It's called the Oregon Project, and it's a marathon developmental team. And just as you just stated, the purpose of this team is to develop American marathoners, to develop some Americans that can go back and run 208s or 209s like we did 22, 23 years ago. And we have had no American-developed runners do that. We have the world record holder in the marathon, Khalid Kanuchi, but born in Morocco. But we've got to show that we can develop Americans in this country. And so that's the goal, is to, whether we win or not, it's a much more competitive scene out there now than when we ran. But at the very least, we should be running as fast as we did 22 or 23 years ago. And that's the purpose of this program, is that we've started at Nike, is hopefully, you know, with my, you know, experience in terms of what it took back then, remembering that, and then knowing everything that we know now scientifically and sports medicine-wise, applying all those things together and having runners in a stable situation for several years where they're not moving around, running races just to make a little extra money, where they're really concentrating on the marathon for 5 years. And then with that, I think we can get guys running as fast, at least, as we did 20 years ago.
Yeah.
There's no reason we can't.
I agree, and hats off to you and to Nike for you know, trying to get American distance running back in the limelight again. You also coach a high school cross-country team that is, since you took over, has really turned into a success program. Talk a little bit about that, Al.
Well, yeah, you know, I'm real proud and, you know, real excited about the high school team. I mean, the older guys, I'm excited about and work with them, and, you know, obviously they've got Olympic, you know, aspirations and so forth. But, you know, I got to say that the thing I enjoy the most, just in terms of peer coaching and just feeling like I'm making a difference, not just running-wise, but in terms of helping to develop people more, to be better citizens, better people. And that's, I coach a high school cross-country team and high school middle distance and distance runners at Central Catholic High School in Portland. And yeah, we've got a great team this year. We're ranked 8th in the country, and God willing, I think we can finish a lot higher than that. I mean, we'll be running against a lot of the top teams about 2 or 3 weeks from now in the country, and so we'll see what happens. But it's been fun because I think these kids have learned. They know that the program, where we started 4 years ago, we were the worst in our league, 8th out of 8th, and now we're up to, you know, one of the top 10 in the country. And
wow.
4 years, you know, is not that long a time, and
No.
you know, and so the tradition is being set now, and I think the program, we've got a lot of young kids that are coming into the program now because they've heard of the success. You know, the excitement is building, and you know, and the best part is that the parents just love it. The parents feel that it's been the best thing for their kids. They've just seen the kids gain so much confidence in that has spilled over in success in other areas, academics, their social life, and so forth. And so, you know, that's really what running should be about. It should be about, you know, the development of people. I mean, sports for its own sake, I don't think is really that important. It's how it makes you a better person. And in high school, I feel we have the opportunity with kids to really stress that. Once kids get out of college, I mean, they've got their character, and, you know, and it's a more professional venture in terms of running. But right now, it's more about making them better people.
Well, Al, you're a great ambassador to the sport of running. We are just thrilled to death that you're here in our community of Detroit Lakes. Thanks so much for being a part of our race this year.
Well, thanks, Dick. You know, you've been after me for years to come here, and I'm just glad that it finally worked out.
Me too, Al. Thanks.